Hey, welcome. Today, we're diving into a huge topic. Basically, us. All of us. We're talking about the nearly 8 billion people on this planet. But we're not just going to look at spreadsheets. Nope. We're going to find the human story that's hidden inside all those numbers. So let's jump right in.
Our source material kicks things off with this really powerful idea. And think about it for a second. A country could be sitting on all the gold or oil in the world, but that stuff is just, well, stuff, until people find a use for it. It's our needs, our skills, that actually turn a lump of rock into a valuable resource. So that's the real question, isn't it? It's obviously not just about being here. So what is it exactly that transforms a human being into the most valuable asset a country can have? Let's break that down. Well, the answer really boils down to one word: potential. It's healthy, educated, and motivated people who come up with the ideas and do the work. They're the ones developing resources to meet our needs. Our skills, our creativity, that's what creates value. And that, right there, is why people are the ultimate resource. And, this ultimate resource is incredibly diverse. I mean, all across the globe, populations are different in every way you can imagine. Education levels, the average age, gender balance, all these things are constantly changing, painting this incredibly dynamic picture of humanity. Okay, so we've got this diverse ultimate resource. But where is everybody? The next chapter in our story is all about the fascinating and really uneven way that people are spread out across the planet. Get ready for this statistic, because it's a wild one. Over 90% of the world's entire population lives on only about 30% of the land. Just let that sink in. That is an unbelievable concentration of people in what are, relatively speaking, pretty small pockets of the globe. And this chart shows you exactly where those pockets are. I mean, look at Asia. A staggering 60% of all people live there. And if you put Asia and Africa together, you're talking about almost 3/4 of the entire human population living on just 2 continents. Wow. And this brings us to an idea called population density. On average, the world has about 51 people for every square kilometer. To make that real, just picture a classroom with 50 students in it. Feels pretty full, right? Now imagine those same 50 students in a giant assembly hall. The number of people is the same, but the density, how crowded it feels, is totally different. So why are some places packed and others practically empty? Well, it pretty much boils down to these factors. Physically, people tend to love flat, fertile plains with fresh water and a nice, moderate climate. Not too hot, not too cold. And then you have these social and economic poles. We're drawn to places with jobs, good schools, healthcare, all the things that make life better. All right, so we know where people live, but that map is never standing still. Populations are always changing. So what's the engine that's driving these numbers up or down? Let's pop the hood and take a look. For most of human history, our population grew at a snail's pace. But then, look at this. It took all of history up until 1804 for us to hit 1 billion people. But then, only 155 years to get to 3 billion. And then, this is the truly mind-blowing part. Just 40 more years to double that to 6 billion. This explosion happened mainly because of better food and medicine, which meant people stopped dying so young, even while birth rates stayed high. At its very core, the math behind this is actually pretty simple. It all comes down to 2 things: the birth rate and the death rate. The difference between those two is what we call the natural growth rate. Yeah, it's really just a simple balancing act. If more people are born than die, the population goes up. If those numbers are about the same, things stay steady. And of course, if more people die than are born, the population goes down. Simple as that. Okay, so now we get the how of population change, but what about the who? It turns out there's this amazing visual tool that can give us a snapshot, like a portrait, of an entire country's population. It sounds kind of crazy, right? How can one simple shape tell you if a country is young and growing, or if it's aging, or if it has a huge workforce? Well, let's see exactly how it works. This is it. It's called a population pyramid. Basically, it shows you how many males and females there are in different age groups. The youngest kids are at the bottom. That tells you about births. And the oldest folks are at the top, which tells you about deaths. The overall shape, well, that tells a really rich story. Let's start with our first story. This is the classic pyramid shape. See how wide it is at the bottom? That screams high birth rate. Lots and lots of children are being born.
But then notice how it gets skinny really fast as you go up? That tells you the death rate is also high, and not many people make it to old age. This shape is the story of a young, rapidly growing population. Okay, now let's look at a different story, a different shape. This one is still pretty wide at the bottom, but the key difference is that it doesn't get narrow quite so fast. This is what happens when death rates start to fall, especially for young children. More infants survive into adulthood, creating this huge bulge of young people. This represents a massive, expanding labor force, a huge economic opportunity for a country. And for our third story, we have a shape that's almost flipped upside down. That very narrow base tells you one thing loud and clear: low birth rates. But look how wide it is toward the top. Low death rates mean many people are living to a ripe old age. This pyramid tells the story of an aging society, which points to challenges down the road, like a shrinking workforce and more pressure on healthcare for the elderly. So we've looked at where we live, how we grow, and the different shapes of our societies. But what does it all mean for our future? Let's bring everything back to that big idea we started with. This quote from our source material really just nails it, doesn't it? All the data, all the charts and pyramids, it all points back to the incredible potential that's locked inside people, especially young people. They really are the future. But, and this is so important, that potential isn't automatic. It doesn't just happen. For people to truly become that ultimate resource, we have to invest in them. They need education, they need to be taught skills, and they absolutely need to be given opportunities to put those skills to use. And that, of course, brings this whole story right back to you. Every single one of us is a part of this global human story. We are all that potential resource. So the question I want to leave you with is this: what will your contribution be? Thanks for tuning in.